So the biggest problem that we face are a lot of different things, but the greater sense of purpose is understanding, is it possible, despite all these problems, that we can still move forward? You know, it was amazing as I was looking at Dr. Your superintendent and the guy who founded this. You know, when you look at Dr. Coates and his message, I looked at that and I looked at all the adversity that he's probably had to go through in creating this group. All the things he's faced as an educator, but yet here's a guy who's still optimistic after all these years. How does that happen? It's a learned condition. It's a programming to say that no matter what I'm facing, that the greater sense of purpose of why I'm here is why I do what it is I do. And see, that third grade year was a turning point. And that turning point in that third grade year was the year in which I decided that probably I was going to succeed, but then I come home from school and my father's home early from work, and that's an unusual thing. And my father, you know, he's a hardcore guy, ex-Marine. My father was not a guy who would have watched Lifetime. My father was not someone who would tell you that he loved you. My father never told me he loved me until I was 34 years old. He just wasn't that guy. But I come home from school and my father's home early from work, unusual thing. And I look at my father, my mother had been crying, so I'm thinking maybe they had been fighting, but what I didn't realize is that of the 36 years of service at this factory job with a 11th grade education, my father was let go. It's 1977. Downsizing started many, many years ago. My father had nowhere else to go. 1977, downsize is over. And I remember my father just looking at that paper, and I never saw my father cry, and I saw him become very emotional. And he went back into the room and he slammed the door and he stayed there for hours. And all of a sudden, my father, who was the primary breadwinner, is now being downsized from his job with nowhere to go with an 11th grade education. What's he going to do? Where's he going to go? So we're being evicted from our home because we don't have the money to pay the rent. And I remember going to school and I was devastated, and I looked at Miss Ritchie and I told her what was going on. And I remember I cried because I knew that my lifeline, my champion, my hero, I was going to be ripped away from her. Well, you know, the thing about it was she told me the day that I left, she said, one day you will be significant. Never forget what we learned here. Never forget that what we learn in our kingdom. Never forget that you are significant. See, sometimes it's not the amount of time that we spend with our students, it is the quality. Because they're never going to remember the big things we do. It's always going to be the small things. It's the hugs. And they say, you can't hug your kids. Listen, hug your kids. If you love your kids, if you love what you do, hug your kids. As long as it's nothing inappropriate, hug your kids. Hug those babies. They need it. Sometimes your hug would be the only hug they get for a week, maybe for a year. Hug your kids. Let them know that you care. Let them know that you love them. Look them in the eye and tell them how important they are, because they need it. Sometimes that's the only thing that gets those kids through the day is your love and your compassion for them. Love your children. Tell them how important they are. Tell them how valuable they are, because let me share this with you. As much as your children need you, I think you need them too. Because many of our lives have been changed by what it is that we do. Many of our lives have been changed by the children that we interacted with. Just like me and Miss Ritchie, we had a connection. It was a mental connection. It was a spiritual connection. Because I love this woman. She was my hero.